conflict happens, women are victims while men are the ones that fight wars. And due to this assumption, men are the ones that control the peace negotiations, their agendas, and their agreements, while women are being left out of the negotiations and their issues are not being included. In the last 30 years, there have been 35 peace agreements signed in the world. Out of those 35, only 7 have included women issues. My question is, how does the inclusion of women issues in the peace agreement influence women's status post-conflict? And what is the extent of that influence? By doing this, I'm looking at 2 case studies. Let me point out that by women issues, I refer to all those points that are discussed in the agreement that promote gender equality, but more specifically on education and political representation. I'm doing a mixed study, that means qualitative and quantitative methods, and I'm using 2 cases, El Salvador and Guatemala. These are 2 very similar cases. They're neighboring countries. They have a social economic background very similar. They speak the same language and the population are highly indigenous. Both of these countries have civil wars in the last 4 years, and both of them ended their civil war with peace agreements. But there is a main difference on these 2 cases. In Guatemala, women issues were included, when in El Salvador, they didn't. I'm taking these 2 cases and I'm analyzing them in 2 ways. I'm dividing it in 2 stages. The first stage looks at the pre-negotiation and the negotiation stages and see who got to the table, what points were discussed, and what was the role of women organizations and networks in this phase. The second phase looks at, or the second stage looks at the implementation, and this is where I'm going to see if there was a change. If really having women issues make an impact or not in the peace agreement and in the society and women's status afterwards. Why am I doing this? Very simple. If we are leaving the women out of the peace negotiations, when there are 50% of the population, and they're also combatants, and they're also victims, then peace cannot be achievable or sustainable. And this is my dissertation.